Hi, my name is Allison Winkler, and for this assignment, I chose to use the KTEA 3rd edition to test my student. So let's begin this presentation. The student we will call Alicia Smith. She is 9 years old and she is a young lady. She began school typically. She went to an elementary preschool where the preschool was held in an elementary school. She then went to a different school for kindergarten, first and second grade. During that time, she was identified as a student with an emotional disturbance since 2014. And when she began her third grade, she was moved to a different elementary school in OPS that had a behavior program. They call it a BSP room, a behavior skills room or center. And she made some improvements there, but then they noticed that her behaviors were still increasing in some areas. The severity was still too bad for them. So she is now at Utah Holly Day School, where her prime focus is behaviors. So this is the third school that she's been at. Socially, she is very immature. She doesn't quite know how to make or keep friends. She's very sensitive and gets very upset when she thinks other people are mad at her, which occurs quite often. Behaviorally, some things that we see is that she will elope from the classroom, screams, bangs on doors, kicks others. Spitting is a big one for her. She'll walk around the school and spit. And she is physically and verbally aggressive. She also does have strengths. All students do, even though sometimes it's hard to see. She is very sensitive, and sometimes that can be a great strength. She knows she's sensitive to others and how they feel. She really enjoys adult attention. She likes working on her schoolwork as long as an adult is with her. She does really well. She also has a passion for animals, and we have a therapy dog that comes to school, and she absolutely loves the therapy dog. So she is a sweet young lady most of the time. So the KTAs kind of broke up in what we were asked to do. There's a total of 19 subtests, I believe, but we only were asked to give 6. So under the reading, there is letter and word recognition and reading comprehension. In the math section, there was math computation and concepts and applications. And then for writing, there was written expression and spelling. So those were the 6 subtests that I gave, and I will tell you about them as we move forward. So to begin with, we started with the letter and word recognition test. At the top of every slide, you will see how she scored for percentile rank and for standard score. And for percentile rank, I like to think of lining up 100 students, putting them in a line, and the 100th student compared to the rest of the other 99 students, or excuse me, the 99th student compared to the rest is ahead of them or is performing above them. And then the student who's down at number 1 is performing behind the other 99. So it kind of ranks the students between 1 and 99 compared to their peers. So for this subtest, Alicia got a percentile rank of 1, which is well below average, and her standard score was 64, and we would like to have her between 85 and 115. Towards the end of this presentation, I will show you a graph so that we can kind of visually map out where she is on all her subtests. So some of those scores might be a little more clear when I do that. So for this subtest, Alicia was asked to identify and pronounce words that were on a little flip folder, and we began at the appropriate level for her grade. She appeared to try her best. She was kind of excited to get going with testing. I'm not really sure she knew what it was, so she did, do a great job. Um, some of the errors that she made were hard versus soft sounds. For example, the letter C, you can use it hard like, or you can use it soft like an S sound. That was a little difficult for her, as well as knowing what sound to make when there are vowel pairs, blending sounds, and reading all the way through the word. Oftentimes, if there was a difficult word that she didn't know, she would kind of sound it out and chunk it. For example, I'm making this up. This isn't one of her examples, but if you had the word reading, she might say e, da, ing. But she'd never put it back together. And that's kind of what I mean by blending. She wouldn't say it faster. And sometimes she wouldn't read all the way to the end of the word. So if it was reading, she might say read. So those were some of the errors that I noticed during this subtest. And my recommendations would be that she would have additional reading instruction, maybe individual or in a small group, about 3 to 5 times a week. And some of the skills that they can work on that would be beneficial for her would be properly chunking and blending different sounds, working on vowel digraphs, different vowel and consonant rules, and word attack strategies. Those are my suggestions. Of course, there's plenty more that they can work on, and hopefully it would be a program or curriculum that's already pre-developed, and so those have a tendency to have a lot more of those skills embedded that she probably needs some additional skills. But those were my recommendations for that subtest. The next one was reading comprehension. Once again, her percentile rank was 2, which is below average. Her standard score was 70, which is also below average. For this subtest, she was asked to read a passage and then answer questions. Again, we began at the appropriate 4th grade level and then started moving down per the rules for this subtest. She grew frustrated very quickly. Reading is a struggle for her due to her behaviors and her past having behaviors. It's evident that she's been out of the classroom a lot. Her skills are immature in many areas. So for reading comprehension, asking her to read a 4th grade passage, she maybe knew 1 word out of every 5, I would guess. And so she's frustrated because she can't get through this paragraph. And then when she had to read the questions, she didn't know what the questions said either. So having her answer them was quite difficult. So we moved down and got to a point where it had her read something and then she had to follow that direction. So one of them was look at the door. And so she would read it. I could tell she comprehended it because then she would look at the door. Some errors that were made, like I said, she was just unable to read words or the words in the questions at this level. She made some word errors even when we went down to the next level. For example, if it said read to the door, look at the door, and she read dear or something like that. There was 1 or 2 where she missed the word and therefore did the wrong thing. And all her errors were at the word level. So I couldn't really get a grasp on her being able to go back to the text. Like, is she going back to the paragraph to answer her questions? I wasn't really able to tell if she was able to infer and things like that because her errors are still at the word level. So she needs additional help attacking those words. So again, additional reading instruction 3 to 5 times a week, either, with others or individually. And I pretty much just kept the same things from the previous subtest and added phonics patterns because, like I said, she's still at the word level. The next subtest is in the area of math. It's math computation. She scored a 3, which for percentile rank, which puts her below average, and her standard score was 71, which is also below This just asked her, there was a 3 by 3 chart on each page and had a math problem in each one. And they started with addition and subtraction. And then as you turn the page, it gets into some more complicated, higher level things like decimals and fractions and money and things like that. But it's all solving math problems. There's no stories, there's no charts or graphs or measurement. It's just at the computation level. So again, we began at the appropriate level, and because she kept making so many errors, we did have to move back twice. She all she was able to complete were 1 and 2 digit addition and subtraction problems, and she was very compliant and willing, and she was very confident about her answers. She thought she was doing them correctly, and she was pretty proud of that. However, some of the errors pretty much happened with subtraction. It appeared to me that she had her addition right. She did get 1 2 digit addition problem incorrect. However, the rest were fine. So it was mostly subtraction, and I couldn't find any other patterns with the subtraction. There was no borrowing, so it wasn't up to that level yet. And there was no patterns of like every time there was a 7 or something like that. So it seemed kind of random. And I noticed she counted with her fingers. So when I was thinking about recommendations, again, additional math instruction, 3 to 5 times a week, working on those addition and subtraction facts. I want them to be automatic. I want her not to have to think about them. She shouldn't be counting on her fingers. We want her to know 6 minus 4 is 2, so that's not holding her back. It'd be also beneficial for her to go through the 2 digit subtraction process with somebody and practice that skill over and over. And then also additional grade level computation skills and the skills between where she's at and where she's expected to be now. She just is behind and has a lot of ground to make up. So I thought that additional time would be beneficial for her. The next subtest is math concepts and applications. She was at a percentile rank of 3, which is below average, and had a standard score of 72. This was more real world problems. She had a chart, she had to refer to it, a story problem, objects that she had to count, money, things like that. She was, again, very compliant and willing. And she used scratch paper, but only one time. I thought maybe that she should have used it more than that one time. But I did note that she used it once. Some of the errors that she made were, again, in subtraction, multiplication, time, money, algebra, and word problems, which would obviously make sense with her reading level being where it is. My recommendation is additional math instruction 3 to 5 times a week. Again, working on those skills in her errors that she was unable to do. And again, she is, probably, if she's just doing addition and subtraction and, things like algebra and stuff, are all the way over here, she has ground to make up in between. So it's really just spending that extra time in a small group or one-on-one environment, catching her up to where she needs to be. She needs a lot of practice. The next subtest was spelling. She did the best in this area with a percentile rank of 4, still below average, and her standard score was 74. So for this, I just basically gave her a spelling test. I had to read a word to her, use it in a sentence, and read the word again. And she wrote it down. She was very compliant and willing. This was her best subtest, as I said, and she also stated that she enjoyed it. So she really likes to spell. Her 3 and 4 letter words were no problem, especially when they were phonetic. If it was hat, for example, act, she could spell that no problem. In the 4-letter words, I was actually really impressed too. She had vowel consonant E correct, like have and gave. And she did pretty well with those as well. As it got longer and more complicated and words got more unfamiliar, obviously that became more difficult for her. When she did spell words wrong and they weren't correct, I thought she did a great attempt at using letters that still sounded correct. So if I gave her spelling list to a stranger, I still think they would know the words she was trying to spell. She made very educated guesses. So for example, a K instead of a C. So that tells me she has a good a base, for spelling, and just need to work on some minor things. She currently does not have spelling instruction in her day, so it's my recommendation that get added. I think that she needs to review sight or grade level Dolch words, whatever the school's using, and just instruction on spelling patterns and different rules. She just, really needs to dive into some of those things. And my recommendation was 3 days a week or more. For written expression, she was below the 0.1 percentile and had a standard score of 44. This was where she would interact with a book. Maybe the book said, write your name, or I would say to her, write your name on the top. The book would maybe have a sentence or so that I would read, and then maybe she had to add a punctuation mark. Maybe she had to look at a picture and write a sentence about it. It had her combine sentences and just different interactive activities with a story. This was the most difficult for her. She would not complete the entire subtest. And in fact, after this subtest, she had a complete blow up and destroyed the room. But one thing that I did notice is the one sentence I could look back at, she had capitalization and punctuation. With that being said, I would not consider these scores for her written expression to be reliable because I was not able to finish the subtests. Her errors included incomplete sentences, writing one word responses, or maybe 2 words, but they didn't make a complete sentence. And my recommendation was some additional writing practice. This could be, 3 times a week or so. And focus on capital letters, writing a complete sentence, what parts you need to have in a sentence, how they work together, parts of a sentence and parts of language such as verbs, adjectives, and things like that, and how they work together. And then because she hates writing so much, it's very difficult for her. I thought that it'd also be important to build in writing activities that were engaging, enjoyable, to kind of increase her motivation and willingness to write. So that, I think, is another important component. Lastly, here is all of our scores charted. Again, we want things to be between this 85 and 115 because that is the average. And you can see she's clear down here with most of her tests kind of hanging around 70, which shows us that overall she is below average. So I had an enjoyable time testing her. Alicia did great, except for that writing subtest, which, like I said, I think would be considered invalid, not reliable score. And overall, it was a great experience. And we have more information for Alicia and her teachers and her parents to know what areas she needs to work in. So it was beneficial all around. Thank you so much for watching me, and I look forward to your presentations as well. Thank you. Bye.